Today we are continuing on with section 2.3. You should have a note sheet that I gave you and your formula sheet because you will be using both for today's lesson. If you see the directions, it says find the exact value or values of each of the remaining trig functions. Hint, try to find sine theta and cosine theta first. So if you look at problem 12, it says sine of theta equals 1/3 and cosine theta is less than 0. In the past, when I gave you these problems, I gave you sine and cosine, and all you had to do was plug in to find tangent and cotangent and cosecant and secant. But what's missing here now is the other part of it. They just told you cosine is less than 0. They didn't actually tell you what cosine is. So this is a little more challenging. So I have sine, which is a good start. But I'd also like to try and find cosine. When you're told to find all 6 trig functions, your best bet is to have sine and cosine. So I'm going to ignore this part for now and just focus on the fact that sine of theta equals 1/3. Again, I'd like to find cosine. So look on your formula sheet under your fundamental identities and see if there are any equations there that have a sine and a cosine in them. Look through here. These have sine over cosine, but there's 3 here. These have reciprocals. This one right here is the one you'll use a great deal in this unit. Sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1. Even though they're squared, I can still deal with that later and get rid of the squared, but it has a sine and a cosine in it. So that's what we want to use. So write that formula down, that identity. So sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1. Now we know what sine is. Sine is 1/3. So we'll replace sine with 1/3, and it's squared, and bring everything else down. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll square that 1/3. And you could type it in your calculator, but it's kind of easier to just do it by hand. 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 3 is 9. Now, I want to solve for cosine. So think of this as a great big X. I have to get rid of the 1/9. So you'll subtract the 1/9 from both sides. So you'll be left with cosine squared theta equals. Now, 1 minus 1/9, if you want to do it by hand, you need a common denominator, so I'm guessing most of you don't want to do it by hand. The other way is obviously the calculator. So I would just type in 1 minus 1 divided by 9, math, enter, enter, and get 8/9. Now again, I'm still looking for cosine, but I have cosine squared. Well, how do I get rid of a square? What's the opposite of squaring something? Square rooting. So we'll square root both sides. So the square and the square root kind of cancel each other out. Now, if you remember back to algebra, if you had something like x squared equals 9 and you did the square root of both sides, you had to do x equals plus or minus 3. You couldn't just do the square root of 9 as 3 because it could be a positive or a negative, because a negative 3 squared is also 9. Well, the same thing's going to happen here. You're going to need to do a plus minus when you square root. So I'll have plus or minus the square root of 8/9. Now I can tidy that up a little bit. So I'll do plus or minus the square root of 8/3, because the square root of 9 is 3. That part's easy, so I don't have to rationalize at least. But that square root of 8 does break out into a 4 and a 2. We always have to simplify. So we get plus or minus 2 square root of 2/3. Now we have a problem. How am I going to have a positive and a negative value for this answer? I can only have one. Can't have both. So this is the part where you look back up at the original problem. It says cosine of theta is less than 0. So that means that cosine is negative. So when I have plus or minus here, to really get my true answer, I think I'll put it over here. Cosine is negative 2 square root of 2 over 3. Because I had the plus or minus, I had to determine which sign it's going to be. Look back at the original problem. It tells me cosine is less than 0, which makes cosine negative. So my answer is cosine of theta equals negative 2 square root of 2 over 3. Well, you feel like you're all done, but you'd be wrong, because you have to find the other trig functions as well. You need to find tangent. You need to find cosecant. You need to find secant. And you need to find cotangent. Wow, all that work and you're not even close to being done. But the hard part's over. So that's what I want you to do right now. Go ahead and pause this and find tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. You don't have to write out the identities like we did earlier because there is quite a bit more work involved. So go ahead and hit pause and find the remaining trig functions. Okay, so let's see how you did. So tangent is sine over cosine. So you should have 1/3 over negative 2 square root of 2 over 3. 3's are going to cancel. Now don't forget, when the 3's cancel, there's still a 1 on top. This line right here, you can't just move that up. 1 stays there, and your negative 2 square root of 2 is there. Now we're going to rationalize because we can't have a square root in the denominator. And I'm going to get negative square root of 2. Square root of 2 over times square root of 2 is 2. Times 2 is 4. And I get negative square root of 2 over 4. Remember, this is negative, so I know my answer will be negative in the end. Then I'll find cosecant. The order you found these in doesn't matter as long as you have all of them. And if you look at cosecant, remember, cosecant's reciprocal is sine. So all they have to do is flip whatever sine is. The reciprocal of 1/3 is just 3. Gotta like that one. Kind of running out of room here, so I'll go ahead and do secant. Secant's reciprocal is cosine. So here's cosine, so I need to flip that. And rationalize. Be a negative 3 square root of 2. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2. Times 2 is 4. Then the last thing I need to do is find cotangent, which I think I'll put right up here. Now, when you find cotangent, you're just flipping tangent. I wouldn't flip here because it's too much work for me. I don't like to work. So if I look past here, if I flip right here, I won't have to rationalize my answer. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to flip tangent right here to find cotangent. So I can just do negative 2 square root of 2. If you chose to flip here and rationalize, you'll get there, but again, you have to do a lot more work. So just to come back to that negative 2 square root of 2. Now, if there's any part of this that didn't make sense to you, hit the rewind and go back and watch it over again. Or call me over and I'd be glad to explain any part that I kind of lost you on. Now, we're going to save 13 for tomorrow. And what I want you to do is flip your papers over to the back. And I just kind of want to give you some helpful hints, hopefully, on how to start these kind of problems. Because usually what students say to me is, well, I don't even know how to begin the problem. Once they have both sine and cosine, they know what to do. It's just getting there can be difficult. So on the back side, it says, how would you start these? So we're not going to do the whole thing. We're going to assume the directions say to find all the trig functions. So if you're given a problem like this, I only have sine. So your best bet is to try and find cosine. So just like the last problem, this has sine and cosine in it. It's an identity that we'll use a great deal. So write that identity down. Sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1. Then sine is negative 4/5. Don't forget to square it. Now we'll square what's in here. Negative 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. And now solve for cosine. So again, think of this as a great big old X. So you need to subtract the 16 over 25. Again, you can put it right in your calculator. You would type in the 1 minus 16 over 25. You want to go to the math key, hit enter a few times, and there's your 9 over 25. So you'll get cosine squared theta equals 9 over 25. Now you can square root both sides. You want to solve for cosine, not cosine squared. Don't forget your plus minus. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 25 is 5. Now, I don't want plus or minus. It has to be a positive or a negative. So look back up at the original problem, and it tells you cosine theta is greater than 0. So that makes cosine positive. So to find this answer, I just make it positive 3/5. Now you have sine and cosine. Now it's easy to use your formula sheet and go and find the others, which we're not going to do for this one because it just says how would you start it. Let's look at letter B. Again, we're just starting this. Now letter B, I don't have sine or cosine given to me. So I'll look here and I'll say, okay, cosecant. What do I know about cosecant? Cosecant's reciprocal is sine. So I know sine by just flipping. Once I know sine, I can find cosine, just like I did on the last two. So you can, again, use the same formula. Plug in sine. Square that value. Again, you can put it in the calculator if you wish, but to me it's not more work. Just square them individually. A negative squared will be a positive. Now we're solving for cosine, so you're going to subtract 1 minus 9 over 25. Put that in your calculator, hit math. Any calculator will do that for you. And you get 16 over 25. Then you're square rooting. Don't forget your plus or minus. Now here's the part where we have to figure out, is it positive or negative? Let's look at the information we're given. It tells us that cotangent is negative. Okay, but I want to know what cosine is. I don't know if it's positive or negative. So if you remember when I taught you, all students take calc, I said at some point this will be used in another problem. Well, today is your lucky day because we're going to use it now. So the two pieces of information we're given is that cosecant is negative 5/3, which makes sine negative 3/5. So I can say that sine is negative. I'm also told that cotangent is less than 0, which makes it negative. Well, if cotangent is negative, so is tangent. Now we'll figure out what quadrant this angle is in. Well, if sine is negative, it can't be in either of these two because sine is positive in both of these. If tangent is negative, it can't be in this quadrant because tangent is positive there. So it must be in quadrant 4. Only in quadrant 4 would cosine and secant be positive. Everything else is going to be negative. That means cosine is positive. So my answer would be cosine theta equals a positive 4/5. Now you have sine and cosine. You could find the other 4 trig functions quite easily. Again, if any of this didn't make sense, rewind, watch it again, ask questions, and then it's time to go on to a little bit of bookwork. So here's the assignment. Page 120, 33 to 39 odd. Make sure you're writing out the problems and showing the work. You can check your answers under the video lessons folder on Schoology. I took a picture and it's on there. Let's take a look at page 120, 33 to 39 odd. That's right down here. The directions say find the exact value of each of the remaining trigonometric functions of theta. That's just what you were doing, so 33 to 39. We'll zoom in just a little bit there for you to see. Now these first two tell you it's in quadrant 2, so you know that sine and cosecant are positive. This one says quadrant 3, so we know that tangent and cotangent are positive. But what the heck is this? Theta is between 90 and 180. Well, let's see what that's all about. If you look at your unit circle, find 90, then find 180. 90, 180. What quadrant is this? 90 and 180. Oh, that's just quadrant 2. It's just another way to tell you it's quadrant 2 That means only sine and cosecant are positive. 39 tells you in a weird way too. It says theta is between pi over 2 and pi. Same thing. Look at your unit circle. Pi over 2, pi. What quadrant is this? Same thing, quadrant 2. All right, so go ahead and pause, do these problems, check the answers, call me over if you have any questions.